abuses of political power. And so what you find is that they always lead the way in attacking whoever challenges the political system in Washington, because that is the system of which they're a part. That's the system that props them up, gives them oxygen, and provides them with all of their privilege, wealth, and access. And I think their true role, which is not to serve as adversaries of people in government power or to expose what they're doing, but to protect and shield them and amplify their message, has become more vividly exposed in the last 4 weeks than it has in quite a long time. And the thing that really amazes me is that if you look at how whistleblowers are treated, whether it be Bradley Manning or WikiLeaks or Thomas Drake at the NSA or Edward Snowden, I can understand why Americans in general, just ordinary Americans, have ambivalence about those whistleblowers. Some people think security is more important, or that secrecy is something that should be decided by democratically elected officials and not by individual whistleblowers. That I all get. But what I don't understand and can never believe is that anybody who at any point thought of themselves as somebody who had a journalistic ethos would look at people who are shining light on the world's most powerful factions and do anything but applaud them and express gratitude for them, since that's supposed to be the function that they, the journalists themselves, are serving. And yet what you find is the exact opposite. What you really find is that if you look at who hates Bradley Manning, or who has expressed the most contempt about WikiLeaks, or who has led the chorus in demonizing Edward Snowden, it is those very people in the media who pretend to want transparency, because transparency against political power is exactly what they don't want, because those are their masters, and the stronger they stay, and the stronger that system stays, the more rewarded they will be. And what is really amazing most of all about it is that while they purport to hate leaks, they themselves are the most prolific users of leaks. I was on Meet the Press last week, the first time I ever ventured into the belly of the imperial beast. And some of you probably know, but it got a lot of attention because David Gregory all but called for my prosecution during the interview. And the reason why, there were a lot of reasons why that was pretty amazing, but one of the most extraordinary things about it was that 90 seconds or so before he actually called for my prosecution, because I committed the crime of doing journalism, of showing the public what the government is doing in the dark, he and I had an argument about a FISA court opinion that had been issued in 2011 that found many of the things that the National Security Agency was doing to be unconstitutional and illegal. And I had described this opinion based on the documents that I have in my possession that talks about them. And he objected, and he said, oh no, the way you've described this opinion is not accurate. I've had government officials tell me that what's actually in this opinion was not a finding that the government did anything wrong or illegal or unconstitutional. Perish the thought. This was nothing more than the government going to the court and saying, can we please have permission to do this spying that we would like to do in the future but haven't yet done? And the court said, no, you're allowed to do this and this and this, but not this and this and this, and then the government went and obeyed the court. Now, David Gregory's claims about what that court opinion were completely false, as I well know, because I've actually seen documents talking about them, as opposed to having government officials whisper in my ear what it says. But what was really amazing about it was that 90 seconds later, he was calling for my prosecution for having disclosed classified information, and yet he, 90 seconds earlier, had just gotten done saying that somebody in the government had come to him and described this top-secret court document, which he then disclosed to the public and to the world by telling me what he thought it said. And the same exact thing happened on CNN when Barbara Starr, who is the Pentagon spokeswoman who works for CNN as the Pentagon reporter, she went on the air and she said, government officials have informed me that the revelations from Edward Snowden published in The Guardian have helped the terrorists by enabling them to evade our systems and change the way that they communicate. It is. It's hilarious. because apparently there are terrorists in the world who haven't heard and don't know that the U.S. government is trying to eavesdrop on their telephone calls and read their emails. These same terrorists are going to be sophisticated enough to detonate very powerful bombs on U.S. soil. But leave that aside. What Barbara Starr did was she had people in government come and leak classified information to her, which she then went on the air and spilled to the world, things that the intelligence agencies supposedly learned that terrorists were doing, and yet nobody called for Barbara Starr's prosecution or dug into her past, and nobody did that to David Gregory, including David Gregory, because what they do is, in their minds, the only kinds of leaks that are bad are leaks that the government doesn't want disclosed to the public. The only crime that you commit is when you do reporting that the government doesn't want you to do, when you expose things to your readers and to your viewers that embarrass political officials. The only thing that is journalism to them is when they carry forth the message that has been implanted in their brains by the political officials whom they serve. And I think this behavior highlights the true purpose of establishment journalism more powerfully than anything I or anybody else have ever written. The very last point I want to make, the thing that I really want to leave you with, the thing that I am trying to get myself to be left with as the thing that is defining how I look at everything from this point forward, is that one of the things that has been most disturbing over the last 3 to 4 years has been this climate of fear that has emerged in exactly the circles that are supposed to challenge government. It has emerged among investigative journalists, including the ones at the most protected media outlets like the New York Times and others. The real investigative journalists who are at these institutions, who do real reporting, are petrified of the U.S. government now. Their sources are beyond petrified. The investigative journalist Jane Mayer, who did so much excellent work uncovering the torture regime during the Bush years, has said that because of the Obama war on whistleblowers and journalism that Jeremy described, investigative journalism in the United States has come to a, quote, standstill. If you talk to anybody in journalism or in the government, they are petrified of even moving. It has been almost impossible to get anyone inside the government to call us back with regard to any story because people are so scared that if anything on their phone record shows that they've called me or called The Guardian, they will be held in extreme suspicion as leakers. And it's not just journalists, but also dissident groups that have been infiltrated and Muslim communities that have been monitored in all sorts of ways. There is a climate of fear in exactly those factions that are most intended to put a check on on those in power. And that has been by design. And one of the things that I set out to do as one of my principal priorities and how I've done this story and how I've gone about that is to show that you actually don't need to be afraid, that you can stand up to the United States government and be defiant when they deserve it, and exercise your constitutional rights without that. And so that is the message that I hope more than anything is conveyed on a visceral level. The revelations about the NSA are important, the things that we learn about journalism is important, but ultimately the thing that matters most is that the rights that we know we have as human beings are rights that we ought to exercise and that nobody can take away from us. And the only way those rights can ever be taken away is if we give in to the fear that is being deliberately imposed. And so that, I hope, is the message of Edward Snowden and of the reporting that we're doing, which is you not only shouldn't be afraid, but do not be afraid. Thank you very much for